Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Now, this may surprise some people who have heard me complain about Impact over the last several weeks, who knows that I struggle to get through Impact pretty much every week. You may say to yourself, Mongo, you couldn't have possibly liked this episode of Impact. And I tell you I did. And if you really are a dedicated listener to this channel, you probably know why. Because they gave your boy 2 hours of Johnny Swinger. I cannot hate that. I cannot disagree with that. I 100% love Johnny Swinger on Impact. They gave me a lot of Johnny Swinger. They built an entire story around Johnny Swinger, and it was a long form story, which made it even easier to get into, easier to pay attention to, and it was well written, believe it or not. So let's talk about Wrestle House 2, the 2-hour extravaganza from Impact Wrestling. So we start this episode with about a 3 to 4 minute poem by the Sinister Minister as he explains to us how we got to Wrestle House 2. So we get the entire 2-year backstory to this thing, where everything before Wrestle House 1, which, and then we get the Wrestle House 1 stuff, then we get the wedding, then the shooting, the murder mystery, then we get Swinger's Palace, and now Wrestle House 2. And they show you how all of this stuff is connected. And this is when I actually was like, damn. Because I've been watching Impact a long time. I really never thought that these things were connected. But they are, you know, because they do feature all of the same characters for the most part. So this is what really kind of gripped me at first. And I was like, wait a minute. I've been watching Impact for 2 years. I've complained about everything on this list. I hated Wrestle House 1. The shooting thing was absolutely silly. The wedding was ridiculous. Everything about it was ridiculous. But if you look at it in terms of it being one long story, then it is pretty interesting. We're filled with twists and turns. Now, that doesn't mean I care about any of these characters. I just love Johnny Swinger, and he's an important part in all of this stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm fully caught up, because a lot of this stuff was over a year ago. You know, Wrestle House was one of the things they were doing almost 2 years ago. So then we get Wrestle House 2, and the crux of Wrestle House 2 is very simple. They kept it very simple, which is really good. They cannot leave Wrestle House until Johnny Swinger is happy, because that's the reason they are there. Rosemary teleported the gang to Wrestle House in order to get Johnny Bravo's virgin blood. And she needs his virgin blood because she's an evil devil thing, okay? So what Johnny Bravo wants in exchange for his blood is for Johnny Swinger to be happy. That's what he wants. So that's why they teleported them to Wrestle House to make Johnny Swinger happy. So everybody that's in Wrestle House has to now find a way to make Johnny Swinger happy. But everybody has their own agendas, because most of the people don't want to be there. You know, most people think it's silly that they're in Wrestle House. You know, Madison Rain talks about how she's a mom and Thanksgiving's coming up and she can't be stuck in the house with all these weirdos. You know, so it was fun how they set those characters up. Rosemary is doing this for her own personal benefit, and everybody's trying to figure out what angle she's trying to get on this thing. Johnny Swinger is depressed. He's isolative. He's locking himself in the room. He doesn't really want to deal with anybody. He's being the Grinch. So when I found out that he was being the Grinch, that kind of stole Thanksgiving. That's when I really started to have fun with this, because they're trying to make him happy, but he doesn't even want to be bothered with him. He's like, "God, leave me alone, Daddy. You know, this is the worst week of my life, Daddy." you know, so it was really fun. So they start talking about Wrestle House 1. And Rosemary, of course, has to explain why it's a different house, because they're not teleported to the same house. She reluctantly had to admit that she had to teleport too many people, so they couldn't get back to Chattanooga, where the original Wrestle House was. So now they're still in Las Vegas. But then the question came up, whose house is this? And that question would be answered later. But Rosemary said her teleporting power, she couldn't teleport everybody back to Chattanooga. She couldn't get that far. So she moved everybody to some secluded place in Las Vegas that is now covered in a hex where if you try to leave, you will see your worst fear. So, of course, Johnny Swingers tries to leave. And we find out that Johnny Swingers' worst fear is Rizats of... Rizats of the past. So, his greatest fear is that all of the rats that he had banged in the past would come back to haunt him or something like that. And he talked about how much he hated Wrestle House 1 because it was stupid and the Brizzards didn't put out. And everybody, everybody is so upset. They even did some inside jokes where they were like, everybody loves Wrestle House. And then somebody was like, not the dirt sheets. And then later in the episode, Eddie Edwards, when Alicia was talking to him, he was like, I didn't watch Wrestle House. And she was like, what? He was like, too much gaga. So they were taking shots at each other. You know, there was a lot of inside references to different things on this show. So, the big part is when Johnny Swinger, after he gets frustrated and he tries to leave the house, he gets met with his fear, which is, the ghost of Rizat's past, and he leaves. And then that's when Rosemary tells everybody, we can't leave until we make Johnny Swinger happy. And then the question comes out, who here really likes Johnny Swinger? And nobody really likes Johnny Swinger. Not even Johnny Bravo, who was the one who was giving up his soul to help Johnny Swinger. He doesn't even really like Johnny Swinger. Then Rosemary announces that, you know, they're short. There should be one other person there, but there's... And then we get Chris Sabin. And Chris Sabin is introduced in slow motion with smoke machines. And he's sexy Chris Sabin. So Havoc is now lusting over Chris Sabin. It is absolutely cartoonishly hilarious. Because Chris Sabin doesn't know he's sexy. So he's like being teleported everywhere without a shirt, right? So he's just like, every time he walks into a room, it's slow motion with smoke machines and all this kind of stuff with sexy music playing. And the only one who notices that he's walking really slow and never wearing a shirt is Caleb. And Caleb is supposed to be the sexy guy. So, and his character here is very interesting because Madison Rain hates being here because, again, she wants to go home to be with her kids for Thanksgiving. And she thinks Caleb thinks the same way. And Caleb talks about how much he hates reality TV, but he knows all the reality TV shows, and he's actually secretly glad to be there because he's glad to be on a reality TV show. So he's the only one who notices that Chris Sabin is sexy Chris Sabin. And Chris Sabin is like, you know, I was teleported here without a shirt, you know. So every time he's seen without a shirt, it's just because he was teleported there without a shirt. But Caleb didn't want to hear that. They got into an argument. And then they had to find out how are they going to lead to the fight scenes. Can't even call them matches. They're technically just fight scenes. And they tried to do the match time from Wrestle House with Tommy Dreamer. That was his thing. So they came across with something else, which was kind of a mix on Chris Sabin's thing when he used to say, I love this place when it comes to the Swingers Palace. So he would say, I love this match. And then they would teleport it to the ring and they would have the match. So the first match, quote unquote, Chris Sabin versus Caleb. And of course, Chris Sabin wins. Then they're teleported back to the thing about the matches on this show, there was about 5 or 6 of them, but they all told the story. If you had to be watching the episode to even get what the match was, and then the match was kept short, you pretty much knew who was going to win. Because the matches didn't matter that much. And that's really a good thing. Because why waste everybody's time with long, drawn-out, back-and-forth matches when the matches are just a vehicle to continue the story? And that really, really was a strong weapon that they used in this episode, is using the matches to tell the story that they were telling outside of the ring. That was an especially powerful tool later in the episode. So, Black Taurus, one of the members of Decay, is an intelligent monster. He's playing Beethoven and he's reading books. He's not really that important in Wrestle House, but it's hilarious that, you know, he doesn't speak English. He speaks in grunts. So he's like Beast from the X-Men. So, except Beast from the X-Men is like, super intelligent. But Black Taurus is more beast than man. So he's wearing suits and everything while he still has the goddamn mask on. It's great. It's hilarious. They did a little spot here where Rosemary and Havoc and Chris Sabin had to leave for a moment. And they factored in that turning point was around this same time. Because they like, we have to teleport away to win our tag team titles, but we'll come back. And Madison Rayne was pissed because they get to leave. And they were like, well, we're not the only ones leaving. Chris Sabin's leaving too. And they weren't gone very long. And of course, they didn't win the tag team titles. So they ended up coming back. On this thing is where I found out that Alicia Edwards, she has a smoker's voice. Her voice is raspy as hell. And she had a lot of lines in this joint too. She was very important in this thing. So her voice was like shot. I don't know what was going on. But they played a video of IPWF, the Impact version of Southpaw Regional Wrestling. And on it was Downtown Daddy Brown, who was played by Willie Mack. And Madison Rayne had this idea to bring Downtown Daddy Brown to the house to make Johnny Swinger happy, because he and Johnny Swinger were pals back in the territory days. Again, Johnny Swinger is a old carny wrestler, supposedly from like the 70s or the 80s or something like that, right? So, the IPWF was in the 90s, and Downtown Daddy Brown was one of his last friends. So, they decided to teleport Downtown Daddy Brown to the house, and they do so. They get Rosemary before she disappears to get Downtown Daddy Brown to come back. They bring him into the house, and he's an old man. So it's Willie Mack with like gray in his beard and gray in his hair. And he looks like a lot like a really fat James from Good Times. And it's fucking hilarious. It really is. And it's great. So they go to Johnny Swinger, who is again depressed, locked in his room. He's not wearing clothes. And they coerce him into wearing at least a shirt. They blindfold him because they think they're going to surprise him with his best friend from the territory days, or the early 90s, near the end of the territories. And when they meet and they take their blindfolds off, because Daddy Brown's also wearing a blindfold, they start to argue. They start to fight. They haven't been friends in a long, long time. And we find out that Downtown Daddy Brown had a stepdaughter that Johnny Swinger banged or something like that. And now Johnny Swinger wants to kill this guy. And he's making all these old jokes about his hips and all this stuff. And Downtown Daddy Brown was like, look, I beat your ass right now, but I got to be in bed by 6 o'clock. And, I just had this hip replaced. So we'll fight you. I'll fight you in the morning. So this gives us an excuse to skip forward in time. They go to commercial. I'm guessing during the commercials when Rosemary and Chris Sabin go and wrestle at Turning Point. And then when they came back, it's the next morning. Johnny Swinger is going to fight Downtown Daddy Brown in the match. It's essentially Willie Mack versus Johnny Swinger. And Johnny Swinger's a job guy, so he loses. But the funny thing is, Downtown Daddy Brown, he's wrestling like an old man. And his finisher is like the bionic elbow, sort of similar to Dusty Rhodes. So he does the bionic elbow. He lands on his hip. And even though... So he's selling and he's cussing out Johnny Swinger as he's pinning him. And of course he wins. And Swinger was like, oh, this is terrible, Daddy. This is awful. At that point, Alicia Edwards is tired of trying to keep this thing a secret. She ends up saying, we can't leave until we make you happy. And you would think Johnny Swinger would use this to his advantage and try to, say, this would make me happy, that would make me happy. But no. Swinger goes the opposite way. Again, he's playing the Grinch. So he's like, I absolutely refuse to ever be happy. My life is going down the toilet and all of you are going to circle the drain with me. He goes full heel on them. He is saying, like, there's nothing you can do. We're stuck here. Because this is the worst week of my life. And I refuse to do anything that's going to make anybody else happy. It is absolutely great. This is excellent stuff. It would have been really easy for Johnny Swinger to go the other way and say, oh, well, if one of these Brizzards, let me, climb up on them, that would have been an easy thing to do. It would have fit the Johnny Swinger character. But it fits this episode better for him to just be like, oh, rats, Daddy. And then, he'll just, it's going away. So Madison Rayne decides she wants to renegotiate the deal with Rosemary's father, who I guess is the devil. And they decide to vote Squid Games like to see who is going to help Johnny Swinger and who's going to want to renegotiate and leave. This splits the house in half as Rosemary, Havoc, Chris Sabin, Black Tortoise, and Crazy Steve, Decay, and Chris Sabin, along with Johnny Bravo, they want to help Johnny Swinger. They all have their own different reasons. Rosemary and Decay is because Rosemary wants Johnny Bravo's blood. Johnny Bravo wants to help Rosemary because, wants to help Johnny Swinger because that was his friend. You know, when he was out on his ass after Taya left him, he didn't have a job, and Johnny Swinger is the one who gave him a job in Swinger's Palace, even though he kind of mistreated him at the time. He wanted him, you know, Johnny Swinger was the one who helped him. And Chris Sabin says, I want to help Johnny Swinger because he created Swinger's Palace, and I love Swinger's Palace. And I felt like I owe him a little bit of happiness for that. While everybody else is like, you know, we have to get out of here. This is stupid at this point. So then, well, actually, I think Johnny Bravo might have been on the other side. I don't remember. I have it in my notes that he's on the Eddie Edwards side, because Eddie Edwards was introduced in this part of the story, because Alicia saw that it was about to become a fight scene. They were about to have a match, and she felt like it was too lopsided. So she said, how about we teleport Eddie here, because I would feel better if Eddie was here. So they teleported Eddie Edwards to the show, and they sung his theme song as he made his introduction. And I of course, was not thrilled about that, but they are essentially playing on what the fans do in the Impact Arena. So Hernan Daddy also wanted out of this thing. So Hernan Daddy and Johnny Bravo, even though it was Johnny Bravo's idea, he kind of wanted to back out of it. I think that was probably more of what happened. And Hernandez was, you know, kind of done with this crap too. So they had the big, like, it was like a multi-gendered 10-man tag or something like that, where it was like Rosemary and Havoc and Chris Sabin versus Black Tortoise and Crazy Steve versus Alicia and Eddie Edwards, Johnny Bravo, Madison Rayne, Caleb, and Hernandez. And Chris Sabin ends up winning the match for his team. So Madison Rayne and Caleb were very upset that they lost. But Caleb, well, he's pretending, because now he's talking about spinoffs and what, you know, they're going to be there so long that there's going to be spinoffs to this show. And he's thinking about, you know, possibly being the star of one of them. So Rosemary then says, okay, how about this idea? And their next idea to make Johnny Swinger happy was to get him to fall in love, which I think is absolutely hilarious. So she finds out that Swingerella #1 is in love with Johnny Swinger, which is something we found out at the end of Wrestle House. We found out, well, not the end of Wrestle House 1, but the end of Swinger's Palace. As he was vacating the place, Swingerella #1 openly expressed her love for Johnny Swinger, and but she's a Rizat, so he wasn't interested at all. So Rosemary decides to introduce the same way that he got Bravo to fall in love with her. She's going to get Johnny Swinger to fall in love with Swingerella #1. And that is by making him jealous. So she puts this, so she introduces Lawrence D, the more intellectual version of Larry D, into the storyline, the lover. And he emits pheromones that kind of makes everything stink in the house. So it's absolutely silly. So he is playing Swingerella #1's boyfriend, and it's his job to make Johnny Swinger jealous. So Swingerella #1 is trying to make Johnny Swinger jealous. He doesn't care. He's not paying her any attention. He's just walking around the house shirtless and pantsless, wearing nothing but a fanny pack. And I think he's wearing shorts too. Oh, this one makes funny. So previously, after he lost to Downtown Daddy Brown, Johnny Swinger says, next time you want to make me happy, Daddy, just kick me in nature's fanny pack. which is hilarious. Everything about Johnny Swinger was great in this episode. I'm telling you, it was not a joke. I am not joking. I'm not being sarcastic at all. If you like Johnny Swinger, this is excellent. And he's a comedic genius. He's great in this joint. So it didn't work. Lawrence D and his pheromones, it did not work. Johnny Swinger is not in love with Swingerella #1. And then we find out that the reason Lawrence D is here is not really to make Johnny Swinger jealous. Lawrence D is here because, well, this is his house. And Rosemary teleported everybody to Lawrence D's house. So despite all this, Madison Rayne has one last opportunity, one last thing that she wants to try. So she has a locker room talk segment, which is her talk show that she does on Impact. Is really bad. But her guest is Johnny Swinger. So Johnny Swinger is sitting on the couch. He's all depressed. We find out his real name is Johnny Parisi, but that name is owned by the WWE, and he says that, you know, you can't use that name, Daddy, or you get a cease and desist from McDevitt, Daddy. So he can't use his real name, which is Johnny Parisi. And Madison Rayne says, I think I got somebody who can cheer you up. And then she introduces Gene Simmons from Kiss. And Johnny Swinger is elated that he thinks Gene Simmons is coming in. And it's just a Kiss demon. Now, we've just gone through this with the Kiss demon. And Johnny Swinger thinking the Kiss demon is Gene Simmons. So, once again, he believes that the Kiss demon is Gene Simmons. And he's talking terrible about the Kiss demon, how he's a no good piece of crap who was pretending to be Gene Simmons. And the Kiss demon is just sitting there in this chair in full regalia, just sitting there. And then he gives them this intellectual breakdown about love. And it is absolutely hilarious. He tells Johnny Swinger, like, you know, you've lived your life going from woman to woman. And look at how miserable it's made you. Don't you think that it's time to settle down? And Johnny Swinger was like, you know, Daddy, you dropped a lot of weight on me, you know. And so he kind of goes away to think about it. And as he ponders this whole thing, everyone thinks that it's finally going to work. Johnny Swinger is finally going to become happy again. So then when they showed up, he says that how Johnny Swinger talks about how he was haunted by ghosts of the Rizats of past, but now he's going to learn to love. And he says, Swingerella #1, I named you Swingerella #1 for a good reason. Maybe it's time for you to become my #1. And of course, at this point, we find out that he doesn't even know what her name is. So he asked her what her name is. It's like Broomhilda or something like that. And I could not function with that name. That name is ridiculous. So, so he wants to now get with Broomhilda. But now Lawrence D is like, no, you cannot have my girl. And everybody's like, you can stop pretending now. Like in front of Johnny Swinger, they're telling him, stop pretending. You know, you don't need to make Johnny Swinger jealous anymore. So now these two guys are going to fight to prove their love to Broomhilda, Swingerella #1. They have the match, and Lawrence D, because Johnny Swinger's a jobber, almost wins the match. And then Johnny Bravo is the referee. So he has to cheat so that Swinger can win. So he, despite Swinger being completely knocked unconscious by some move, he only counted to 2 and then blamed Lawrence D for cheating and saying that he's releasing pheromones or he's doing some type of odors or whatever to distract Johnny Swinger. And we get from that, Johnny Swinger goes and gets his Fuji dust, which is, you know, the salt that Mr. Fuji used to throw. He throws the salt at Lawrence D, hits him with a net breaker and pins him. And so now that Swinger has won, he can now move on to be with Swingerella #1. So he goes in his fanny pack and he pulls out some white stuff. And then she's like, what's that? More Fuji dust? He's like, yeah, let's go with that, Daddy. It's clearly cocaine, right? It's clearly cocaine. Anyway, he gives her like this engagement ring or something like that. So everybody thinks, okay, this is great. We can finally go home. Johnny Swinger is happy. He's got Swingerella #1. And things start to get a little weird. Rosemary is being kind of greedy. She's like, no, we can't leave until they get married. And then Alicia Edwards was like, what? Married? They really just started dating. And, you know, but Rosemary is not going to let anybody leave until they are married. So then Johnny Bravo and Swingerella start getting weird. They start acting strange too. So everybody started, like right around this point in time, all of this starts getting really weird. Alicia starts taking front and center at this point because she wants this wedding to be taken seriously. Eddie Edwards thinks it's a joke. And the swing man names Hernandaddy, his best man. And he also calls him a Mexico. My favorite Mexico. So as they are, everybody's getting suspicious because Rosemary won't let them leave, even after, you know, it's seemingly Swinger is seemingly happy. And Hernandez overhears that Rosemary is going to get Johnny Bravo's blood from this. And he's going to tell everybody. So Rosemary traps him in a fight with Black Taurus. That's the reason Black Taurus is there. You know, because he is her enforcer. So as Hernandez is like, I'm going to tell everybody why you're doing this to us and why you won't let us leave. And then she's like, oh, really? And she teleports them to the ring without even the whole, I love this match trigger word. And we see that Rosemary is kind of turning a little bit of heel here. And so Hernandez is forced to fight Black Taurus. He loses, which you would think would be enough, but it wasn't. Hernandez then gets up and proudly says, despite the fact that he lost, he's still going to go tell everybody what Rosemary is doing and that Rosemary is trying to steal Johnny Bravo's soul. So then she Men in Black brain wipes this guy. I was like, what the fuck? At this point, we had done so much dumb shit that I was fully invested. And I was like, wait a minute. She just brain wiped him. She could have brain wiped everybody at some point. So she brain wiped Hernandez, who now thinks it's 2006 and that he's still in LAX with Homicide and Conan, and they're still feuding with Team 3D. It's so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous, man. It was hilarious. It was great. Later, they continue to be weird, and Eddie Edwards then overhears what's going on here. And Eddie Edwards is like, wait a minute. You guys are trying to steal Johnny Bravo's soul? And then Rosemary mind wipes him too. But I don't know when she mind wiped him too. So, but he's mind wiped now as well. So then Chris Sabin finds that this chick that they had brought along, I think it's Swingerella number 2, has been floating around him and Havoc and all this. And he probably admits that he's a married man. So he wants to go to the wedding just as friends, not as a date, but as just as friends. And while Hernandez goes shopping for a new suit with Caleb and I believe Johnny Bravo, because he ripped his pants in a match with Black Taurus, and Alicia doesn't want him in the wedding with ripped pants. It was very silly. So the Sinister Minister shows up to officiate the wedding, which of course you knew it was going to be weird. He goes through a lot of the vows before it's finally revealed that Johnny Bravo just says, I can't let this happen. And everyone's like, okay, what's going on? You know, and Johnny Bravo admits that he's not a virgin anymore. And so Rosemary is not going to get anything from this. And he and Rosemary starts hissing like, shh, I knew your blood smelled weird. So, of course, like, you know, the wicked witch that she is, she's kind of backing off and like, you know, she's not going to get anything. So Swinger is happy, but she's not going to get anything because Johnny Bravo is not a virgin anymore. So she can't get his sweet virgin blood. But that wasn't really that was a big shocker to fuck with Rosemary. The biggest shocker, of course, is why he's not a virgin anymore. And that's because he's been banging Swingerella number 1. And Swinger finds out about this at the altar and laughs, which is hilarious. He laughs and says, you fell for the oldest rule in the book, Daddy. Never fall for a risette. And he kind of walks away from the altar or whatever. So he's good. Then they decide that Swingerella number 1, Broomhilda, which is her real name, is going to marry Johnny Bravo because he's like, okay, you know, she took care of me, yada, yada, yada. They decide to get married. So they are able to go home because Rosemary has to keep her word, and Johnny Swinger is happy. So they find out afterwards why Johnny Swinger is happy. And Johnny Swinger is happy because his good bro, Johnny Bravo, saved him from marrying a Rizat. So because Johnny Bravo stopped him from marrying a Rizat, he's very happy and he's glad to know, and he's thankful. So he's no longer the Grinch that stole Thanksgiving. He's in a good mood. Not everyone can go home. This was excellent. This was fantastic. It's simple storytelling. You know, the end hangs on the beginning. Johnny Swinger almost bit the poetic dust from marrying a Rizat, despite the fact that his biggest fear was the ghost of Rizat's past. His biggest fear, of course, was Rizat's. And he almost married one. But his good buddy, Johnny Bravo, saved him that trouble by admitting that he was having sex with this girl. So that was great. And in the end, everyone got what they wanted except Rosemary. You know, Madison Rain didn't get home in time for Thanksgiving, but she got to have Thanksgiving with her new family, which is all the Wrestle House folks. Caleb got to be on the show. Alicia got to put together the wedding, and the wedding went off pretty smooth outside of the bride. The different people got married, but at least they got, you know, somebody got married. Black Taurus got some time to himself to read books and play music. Chris Sabin, you know, was still sexy, but, you know, was married, and everything turned up roses for everybody except Rosemary, who didn't get the sweet virgin blood that she wanted. And, you know, but this was excellent storytelling. This is what I mean by you could tell a story and the matches aren't that important. Now, again, this is a Thanksgiving / Christmas special. So you can't do this every week, and not every wrestling show can get away with this. It is something that they done because Impact put the time in and put the effort in order to write this thing and tie in all of the other long stories that they've done. And I could tell that this thing still isn't over. There's still some gems that they dropped that we might be able to build upon later, like Johnny Bravo's and Swingerella's relationship. That's one thing they could continue to build on. Johnny Swinger's new turn of, you know, maybe wanting to be a lover and not a playboy for the rest of his life. You know, that his continued thing with the Kiss Demon, who he thinks is Gene Simmons. That's another thing too they could continue to play on. There are some little things here and there that they could continue to play on. There's also some things that are kind of over, like the Johnny Bravo Rosemary arc. Rosemary only dealt with Johnny Bravo because she wanted his blood. Now she can't get his blood anymore. I really don't know how, you know, what more they can build off of. Of course, because this is a fantasy story, essentially, they can just make up stuff. They can find different reasons. And then, of course, they have the Hernandez, him being mind wiped, him and Eddie Edwards. There's got to be some stuff that they're going to do with that into the future. And that ought to be fun, too, to see and how mind wiped Eddie Edwards. Does he go back to being wrestler Eddie Edwards, and this is how he gets out of being Little Tommy Dreamer? You know, maybe Hernandez actually starts taking wrestling a lot more seriously now that he thinks it's 2006 and he's looking for Homicide and Conan. And are they going to make appearances? So there's good questions to come out of this thing, and it could be really, really fun to visit in the future as far as storytelling purposes. Now, the reason I like this, and I didn't like, you know, the bits and pieces of Wrestle House or anything, is because they didn't mix this with other things. This was a complete story that featured magic from the beginning and at the end. And it told the sense that the magic had rules. There was limitations to Rosemary's powers. There was limitations to what she could do. She couldn't break her own rules. So, like, it wasn't like she could, you know, change Johnny Bravo's blood into being virgin blood so she can take it or anything like that. There was different rules to the things that she could do. She was limited. And what pushed forward was the humanity of the characters. You know, whether the relationships of these characters, whether they liked each other or not, how they come to like each other, whether they don't like each other. They mixed matches in, where even if you aren't interested in the matches, there's still matches. So if you're like a wrestling fan, you're like, this show needs to have matches on it. Well, they have matches on it. you know, but they also put storyline reasons to why the match happens, and the outcome of the match factors into the rest of the story. Like, even though Hernandez lost to Black Taurus by a roll-up, that was a completely silly booking decision. You would think that they would do something where Taurus would, like, tear him apart, and it would be like a death scene or something like that. They did Taurus winning, and then Hernandez saying, well, I'm still going to snitch, is why Rosemary mind wiped him. You know, so that was very interesting. They ended up staying in the house because Rosemary's team won the big 10-person tag or whatever it was. So it was fun from that perspective. They didn't try to mix in other more serious storylines with it. They just went full fantasy, where it was, you know, magic and other kind of weird stuff in it. It wasn't like, now we're going to go over to this blood feud over here where Sami Callihan's powerbombing guys on thumbtacks. You know, it was like, okay, we're going to take this entire episode. We're going to dedicate this entire episode to these fantastical elements of Impact. It's just like I loved the Firefly Funhouse match, where they took this particular match. I wish they could have done a whole show on it, if we're being honest, where you take an entire show or a piece of the show, and you dedicate this entire piece to the fantastical element. The same thing with the Boneyard match at WrestleMania and the Firefly Funhouse match. You dedicate something to it where it doesn't cut into the rest of the show, you know, because you have to try to figure out why magic works in this part and not in all these other parts. You don't have to figure that out, because this entire thing here is story. So this, just like the EC3 control your narrative thing, is a great storyline device. EC3's control your narrative was grittier, more Fight Club. This was a lot more comedy, but it still had good character development, where you had characters had to make decisions, and their decisions informed who they were, what they were doing up to this point, what the characters involved are thinking, and all this kind of stuff. And so it was really fun to watch these characters develop in Wrestle House. And it was good. You know, is it a great wrestling show? No. But it was a nice treat for somebody like me who had actually suffered through all this stuff, to see it all be tied together in one episode, and know that there's probably still going to be more coming. So this really worked for me. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, donate to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Skin tone, so why attach yourself and piggyback the wealth you didn't earn or lack yourself? I'm telling you to own up to your own success and failures. It's a reason why